Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Live at the Waterhole session with Wild Earth in association with Africa. My name is Ben Coley, and I will be your naturalist for the next 2 hours or so as we explore all of the surrounding cameras in southern, western, and eastern Africa. Don't forget, this is live and interactive, as many of you will already know. But if you are joining us for the first time, please do remember that you can send in any questions and comments. And as always, I'll do my absolute best to answer any of those questions if I can. And if I can't, I will try and find out and get back to you. I am with you for the next 4 days, I think. So any questions I can't answer today, it will give me something to go and research. And I will come back to you hopefully with some answers. But we have started off the afternoon at one of our new waterhole locations. This is Onguma in Namibia, so pretty much bordering and a part of the Etosha National Park. This is Onguma Private Game Reserve. And you can clearly see from the landscape that we are certainly not in the low veldt or East Africa here, that very characteristic dry and arid surrounding area of the western side of the continent, or the southwestern side of the continent. But this is the first time I've seen this waterhole. I believe it only got its first airing yesterday. So very, very cool to see. And talk about an oasis in the middle of nowhere. If I was an animal, I'd definitely be making a beeline to this spot. Rather beautiful with that little island of grass or reeds in the center. And that rather stunning three sort of pronged tree, three trunked tree. Looks like one of the Pachelias or Senegalia species standing watch over the waterhole. Very picturesque. Looks like we've got a few springbok and a few wildebeest coming down to enjoy the water there. Couple of afternoons coming through, which is always nice to hear. Catherine, you're enjoying a nice hot day in Germany. You're ready for a pool party? Well, that sounds like an excellent idea. Of course, it is winter over here in Africa at the moment. That being said, we've had quite a mild winter thus far. Yesterday, for example, was in the low 30s, and it's really not cooling down that much at night, still in the teens, which we are grateful for. But we'll see. Maybe we have some elephants having a pool party at some point because it is very dry this time of year for us. Dutch Thea, also very hot in the Netherlands. Well, good to know that European summer has arrived, and very happy to hear that you're enjoying Wild Earth and you like to listen, watch, and relax and enjoy these lovely images. Hopefully, we will be able to bring you plenty of those as the afternoon moves on. Mercedes Bean, also good afternoon to you, or wishing good afternoon to myself, the Wild Earth crew and fellow chatters. And Harriet Hodgkin, good afternoon as well. Hello to you. And I'm glad to hear it's actually a bit of sun in Cape Town. Of course, I know you've had some rather terrible weather in that area over the last week or two, so I'm glad to hear there's been a little bit of a respite. It's not an area I know particularly well. I have visited Namibia a few times. I've been down to Sossusvlei. I've been up into Damaraland. Obviously, spent some time around Irindi and some of the reserves there, but I've never actually got myself up to Etosha yet, which is terrible, and something I'd like to change over the next year or two. But I'm surprised there aren't more animals around this waterhole. If you just look how little else there is, it is a rather desolate location. But certainly these blue wildebeest and a few warthogs enjoying this very, very important water source. See, Catherine, you've been to Onguma. I'm glad you're happy to see it again. I wonder if you actually went to this waterhole. I believe this is close to the fort camp, and this is their view. So it does look very, very beautiful. And as someone who enjoys nice open vistas and clear skies, many places in Namibia, it will be absolutely spectacular after dark on new moon nights, or when the moon has not yet risen or has already set. Namibia really is one of the best places in the world to see the night sky for many reasons. One of the main ones is that it's very, very dry in terms of its atmospherics, so very little humidity, which means really crystal clear skies because the light is not being refracted by water vapor and humidity in the air. So very, very pretty. Lola, you're asking if I think that Onguma gets striped or brown hyenas, or maybe we should ask Catherine if she saw any there. But striped hyena, pretty much, well, I can definitely say no. They do not occur in southern Africa. Yes, in eastern Africa, but no striped hyenas in southern Africa. It's not a mammal species that I've ever seen. The closest thing that we do get, which I imagine you would find at Onguma, would be an aardwolf, which is still in the family of hyenas. So you've got striped, brown, spotted, and aardwolf are the four members of the Hyaenidae family, exclusive termite eaters, with little sort of peg-like teeth for grinding up termite exoskeletons. Aardwolf I've only ever seen, I think, twice up in the Kalahari area in the northwest of South Africa. But very, very special to see when you do. Not something you see very often. They are very, very occasionally seen in Kruger. I know one was seen in the north of Kruger not that long ago. But yeah, not something that you expect to tick off the list very often. But brown hyena, definitely. Brown and spotted hyena, yes. But perhaps not in the same big numbers that you would expect to see spotted hyenas, even though brown hyenas are clan or have a social structure of a clan, a hierarchical group, a matriarchal system with a dominant female. They are a lot more nomadic than the spotted hyenas and don't have quite the same close knit social structure. They will go off on their own for very long periods of time. And you'll almost always only ever see one unless it is a den situation. And because of that, they have a very interesting ability to mark their territory. So striped hyenas have anal glands, certainly, where they paste this secretion onto grass stems and things, and it gives off a very pungent smell. If your nose is tuned to it, you can smell it even when you drive past it. I know some people are incredibly tuned into that and can smell it from a mile away. I myself struggle with it. But they just have the one secretion. Brown hyenas, however, have two different secretions, a white and a black sort of pasting that they can leave. The white one is more of a short term thing. Sorry, the black one is a short term thing, and the white one is a longer term. Or is it the other way around? It's been a while since I've seen one. But either way, they have this secondary type of gland or secretion they can produce from the gland, which lasts a lot longer because of the fact that they travel over huge distances and are often separated from their clan members for long periods of time. That's a fantastic way to keep in touch with distant members. Oh, Catherine, you've got back to me. Thank you. You haven't been to this waterhole, but you have been to some of the campsites in the east. I think it's about 35,000 hectares that Onguma has in its reserve. So I'm sure it's very difficult to see all of it, but I'm glad at least that you have seen some of it. It's certainly somewhere I'd like to get to. Very dramatic scenery. CCC, yeah, sorry, I seem to have caused you offence with saying that we've had a mild winter. I should say that we here in the Lowveld, particularly where I am in Hoedspruit, have had a very mild winter thus far, although it did get down to about 4 or 5 degrees a couple of weeks ago, but of late it's been good. But I'm sorry to hear it was freezing in Amakala this morning. Um, and yes, I'm glad to hear that in town the rain has left a little bit. I hope everybody is safe and well down there. It certainly did look as if it was a rather unpleasant time for a lot of people. So fingers crossed everybody is safe and well. But I was out last night doing some star photography, despite the almost full moon. It's full moon tonight. I've got filters that can cut through the moon glow and still see various objects up there, and it was still 19 degrees when I got back at about 10 o'clock, which is uncharacteristically warm for this time of year. But say, South Africa is a big country, and there are different areas that do get a lot colder. I know they had minus figures in Johannesburg, I think it was last week. So we've gotten away with it so far up here in the Lowveld. I think it was 32, 33 degrees yesterday. Much, much cooler today, though. A little bit of cloud cover. All right, but very, very nice to see one of our new locations here on Guma. But I think we're going to head all the way up to Oldonyo Waterhole in Kenya, where I believe there is a hive of activity. Ah, look at that! Something out like something out of the Lion King. Elephants, zebras, giraffes, everybody's sharing. How nice to see. Lovely vocalizations from the zebras there. And how about that for an idyllic safari scene? Do lovely painting. Our pal was saying that yes, our winter is hotter than most German summers. I believe so. Occasionally heat waves in Europe. I remember being in England a few years ago visiting in the summer, and it was up into the high 30s. I said this last time I was on. It's strange when England gets to that sort of temperature, it feels like it's about 50 degrees. Maybe it's just because it's so unusual. And Spas, you're also saying that we do sometimes see striped hyenas here in Algonio. Well, absolutely, their distribution range does fall into this area. So that would be pretty amazing to see a striped hyena. Say something I have never seen. I did spend a year in Tanzania, but no sign of any striped hyenas where I was, even if they did occur there. See the zebras making way for this elephant, but they seem to be unsure, as usual. A little bit of fisticuffs between all these zebras here. We'll have different harems coming together to utilize this resource. So there'll always be a little bit of infighting between the individuals there. You can see the one stallion on the left, which is chasing somebody away there. Everybody a little bit skittish. Flailing hooves, but so very normal amongst big groups of zebras. Lots of fighting between them. They are well known to be, they're always described as rather cantankerous. They are somewhat feisty creatures. And Mindy, you're saying the waterhole is buzzing. Absolutely. Aldonio has been for the last few weeks or so, it has been a real hive of activity. T-Justin 12, if you're asking what is basically the life expectancy of a giraffe, well, obviously there's lots of factors. There's always a difference between an animal's life expectancy in the wild versus in captivity. So, as a very generalized average, we would normally say around about 25 years in the wild for a giraffe, which is perhaps not as long as you might think for such a large animal. But in captivity, where there are less threats and you can grow old in relative peace, and it doesn't matter if you say if you lose condition, but you haven't got to be looking over your shoulder all the time for lions and other predators and hyenas and things. Then it's not unusual for giraffes to get up into their sort of mid 30s. Makes a big difference if you've got regular access to food and water, not such stresses brought on you by climatic conditions and the pressure of predation. Probably better or less likely to pick up diseases, or possibly more likely, depending on the situation. But then care can be given. So yeah, probably a difference of up to about 10 years between captive versus wild animals. But I'd say on average, low 20s to mid 20 years for a giraffe. I see the mint. You've asked what is often quite a delicate question, so you'll excuse me if I sort of tiptoe around the subject, but you've sort of asked about trophy hunting and whether or not it is say a good idea. But for things such as giraffe and lions and elephants, again, this is a very, very difficult topic because people have very varied opinions on it. Um, Trophy hunting, personally, I'm not a fan of trophy hunting. I don't really say I disagree with it. I would say as long as it's done ethically, I suppose you could argue that, well, some people will argue that it has a place. The only positive thing, if I could even call it that, in my opinion, of trophy hunting, um, on the assumption, the proviso that it is done properly. And when I say that it is done properly, that the correct animal is chosen. So, one or selected, perhaps is a better idea. So, one that is going to have no knock on effect of the gene pool, that is beyond its opportunity of mating and passing on those genetics, is that it does generate a large income for game reserves and for conservation areas that they can then put to good use to improve that area for the existing wildlife. Um, for something like an elephant, ultimately they do die of malnutrition, assuming something else doesn't get to them first. It's old age slash malnutrition because their teeth get ground down so much when they get up into their late 50s, they can no longer get enough energy into that stomach to run that huge body. So you could argue that not removing them from the equation leads to a slow and potentially painful and unpleasant death. Um, but say personally, I don't have any interest in trophy hunting myself, but we do know that trophy hunting brings in a huge amount of money in comparison to a photographic tourist. And say, on the assumption it's done ethically, that the correct, in inverted commas, approach, um, and more perhaps most importantly, that the proceeds that are gained from that exercise are, are returned to that conservation area from where it was conducted. That is a good source of income as long as it's used properly. I really tried to cover my bases there because I know there'll be people who disagree or agree with that. It's a very, very grey area, and something that people make their own minds up. Well, it seems there's a bit of a shift change at the waterhole now. The zebras and giraffes have made way for a few more bulls coming in. Again, no sign of a breeding herd here at Old Onya. We seem to have a massive amount of bulls, although this youngster in the middle there will have left his herd, but I don't think we'll be too far away from his natal herd. Still quite young, but a very nice size differential. See the difference between a juvenile and an adult, or a sub-adult and an adult elephant. And a very brave or thirsty giraffe that's going to try its luck surrounding the no, think better of it. I see, Catherine, you were asking after the injured giraffe that was seen with Trish yesterday. So I didn't catch the show yesterday. I was busy. But for those of you who also missed it, hello, Water. It sounds like there was a giraffe spotted that had an injury to its leg, possibly something sticking out of its leg, whether or not it was a bone or a branch. This youngster gonna give this warthog some grief. So yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that giraffe. It's always nice to catch up. Little warthog's got some guts, eh? Not intimidated by this elephant at all. But we'll keep an eye out for that giraffe. Certainly nice to see them, seeing how their recovery is going. A very bold warthog, but I think he's decided that maybe it's not worth it. In the testosterone of youth, this is all the other elephants really can't be bothered to expend energy on that little warthog. This youngster's still trying to show off, possibly to his big brothers there. Well, that's a perfect example of how important these big bulls are in elephant society and these bachelor groups, and how important it is to have a calming, mature influence on these young males. They are very much like teenagers, lots and lots of testosterone, and often in scenarios where adolescent elephant bulls are in that don't have that supervisory role brought about by these bigger elephants who know how to handle themselves, they can become a bit of a nuisance, a bit of a menace. Lots of reports in reserves that have brought in young elephants over the years, where those young elephants have become aggressive towards vehicles and even other animals, killing other animals, pushing over cars, generally being a bit of a pain. But as soon as the stabilizing influence of a big mature bull is brought in, it just quells those testosterone levels, adds a little bit of discipline, adds a little bit of discipline to the equation, and just keeps everybody under control a little bit more. These warthogs are coming back. Yeah? They're interested. They're just going to do a quick run past. No, interested to see if this youngster has an opinion on this. Probably not going to be very impressed. Zebras, you're blocking the view. I think maybe this young bull has given up chasing the warthogs now. But it sounds like we've got some interesting goings on down at Founders in the Eastern Cape. Let's quickly pop down there. Oh, magnificent. So from Namibia to Kenya to back to South Africa in the Eastern Cape, and a couple of white rhinos having a drink at Founders Lodge. Very, very nice to see. Harpelm, you're going to Kruger in a couple of weeks. Well, I hope you have a fantastic time. And you've been going almost every year for the last 20 years, and you're still as excited as ever. I completely agree with you. There is something very, very special about that place and most game reserves. But for me, particularly Kruger, it's where I started out. And just being there is a very, very special thing, especially having spent a lot of last year out of the country or out of the continent for that matter. I spent about 8 or 9 months in New Zealand and a few months in England. I've been lucky enough to get back into Kruger Park. I've had a couple of drives through there on my way to and from some work engagements and also just from a pleasure perspective. And it is just so, I don't know what the right word is, so soothing to just drive. It doesn't matter if you see nothing at all, it's just being in the park and the knowledge that you might see something. And I was very lucky. I've seen leopard, I've seen multiple lions, lots of elephants, seen herds of buffalo, loads and loads of general game. The only thing I haven't seen is a rhino. So this is nice to see, even only on film. But it's become very apparent to me over the last, I'd say, probably decade or so, when the whole sort of rhino poaching epidemic thing was reaching incredibly high proportions. I hadn't really seen the obvious effects of that. I was working in the bush full time, seeing rhinos almost on a daily basis. But now, a few years on, the aftermath of those atrocities that have happened um, have very much manifested in the viewing options. It is quite normal now when I go out into an area like that that the thing you have to look hardest for is a rhino. There are just definitely fewer of them around. Oop, slip slide. And the ones that are there have become a little bit more skittish, a little bit more nervous, and keep away from more populated areas. And that's also as a result of us trying to discourage rhinos from hanging out close to fences and roads and things, which is a good thing. So it has become very, very special to see rhinos again. Just a brief view like that is more than worth it. That was certainly a nice big bull. Interesting, his tail was curled up. That was usually a sign of stress. I noticed the other one was the same. Whether or not there was anything or any reason why they vacated the area, if there was a disturbance perhaps. But let's head back up to Oldonyo and see the activity up there, and maybe those rhinos pop back again at some point. Yeah, seems this young bull has decided I'm going to stand right in the middle of the waterhole. It is mine. But it looks like he's grown tired of these warthogs. Little pesky things, they're not going away, so why waste your energy? And Hudson, you agreeing? So awesome to see rhino on the cans. Yeah, very, very special. Very special. Caden, you're right. These warthogs are very brave. I certainly wouldn't be wandering into the thick of that myself. But I imagine this is not the first time that they have seen it, and they're quite used to being huffed and puffed at, and very rarely does it ever become too serious. And I think they're fairly confident they could get out of the way if needs be. And water is a vital resource. Only a few days without water is enough for most animals, unless they are specifically adapted to go without it for long periods of time. And I think even the elephants understand that. And there is a much greater notion of sharing and helping one's own, perhaps in the animal kingdom, than we sometimes do. So lovely to see so many species sharing such a precious resource. But also never underestimate a warthog, okay? These things are far more fearsome and ferocious than you might think. So I have seen a warthog give a lone lioness a real run for her money. Many a lioness has been injured by a warthog and died from their wounds. They are incredibly, incredibly strong. They're like little tanks. I would also an adult warthog versus a one lioness is pretty much a 50-50 battle. Different if it's a male or if it's a pride situation, obviously, but one on one, those tusks, particularly the tusks on the bottom jaw, are razor, razor sharp. The big curled tusks that we see on a warthog on the top jaw, that is really more for a visual sign and for males to use when boxing with each other for mating opportunities. But it's those much shorter, sharper tusks on the bottom jaw that you need to be more careful of. And the big boy at the back's just making some space for himself. There you can see the impressive tusks on the left, the other three on the right, much younger, haven't yet fully developed those tusks, but plenty of moustachial hair there, which again we think is an adaptation that all young warthogs have, so that at a quick glance, any potential predator might mistake those pointy white hairs as tusks and maybe leave them alone. I hope you enjoyed the fact that yeah, the warthog came back with 3 or 4 friends this time. Safety in numbers. Jive Bunny, you're in southwest England, where I hail from. You would rather be out here despite the warm, humid temperatures. Absolutely. Why would you not be when we get to see sights like this? And you're quite right. This is a soap opera with the Tuskers in charge. So some spectacular big elephant bulls up in this area for sure. And Dutch Theo also commenting how nice it is to see all these different species sharing such a small waterhole. It's warming to see, and good to know that everybody is still getting on. So elephants can be very protective of water and chase other animals away, but so not knowing Oldonio that well, I've not been up there myself. I'm not sure how far it is to the next waterhole, so nice to see some sharing. He's still voicing his disapproval at something. I don't know if the warthogs. I can just imagine the warthogs standing off camera shouting obscenities at these elephants now. But how beautiful is that? Elephants in the foreground, and then giraffe, then zebras. Maybe that's what the head flap was. Oh, look at this big boy coming in. He's definitely a big old man with a floppy ear, possibly injured in a fight and some sort of damage to the cartilage down there, leaving a schooling card on the way through. Amazing to think they can produce over 100 kilograms, 220 or so pounds of that on a daily basis. Excellent fertilizer, though. Lots and lots of seeds in there, particularly this time of year, that will have a perfect spot to germinate. You can see there's one warthog trying his luck again. This youngster's just had a little flap at him again. But I feel a bit bad for these other animals because, with the exception of that youngster who stood in the water, hardly any of these elephants are actually drinking. They're just standing around, not doing very much monopolizing the area. I thought better of it. It's quite funny watching that youngster just when they warthog first approach. He kind of looked at it and thought, can I be bothered? Yeah, I'll just give him a little bit of a warning. And I feel like he's trying to be the centre of attention and showing off to all the bigger ones here. Deemed himself the protector of the group. Maybe trying to curry a little bit of favour, prove his worth. This elephant seems to have lost his tail. I wonder how that's happened. But like completely lost his tail, almost right up to the the top of his pelvis. Not even so much as a stump there. So Jordan in my ears just said it looks like a belly button. It does a little bit, Jordan. You're right. But yeah, I'm trying to think what would have caused him to lose his tail quite so high up. Um, we do see it sometimes in zebras. It's quite often to see, or quite common to see zebras with no tail. Um, Sometimes as a result of attacks from lions and things. More often than not, it's um, from males biting at each other. They have a tendency to bite at the tail, but yeah, that's been lopped off right up at the top. I don't know what could have done that. Some sort of infection, perhaps. Very strange. I refuse to believe that it was from lions on an elephant that size, unless it happened when he was very, very small. We certainly see times when trunks have been cut from things like snares, but there wouldn't be a snare that would have got all the way up there. Can only assume it was some infection caused by something, but that's odd. Nothing to hide your dignity. Shame, elephant. Candice, you're right. It has been a never-ending stream of Ellies, but so these dry conditions, these water holes become very, very important. So I've missed a few of these comments coming through. So Catherine, you agreeing with me about warthogs and saying the same with wild boar, not to mess with them. Absolutely. Even pigs. Pigs are huge when you actually see even I wouldn't say a domestic pig, but you know what I mean. They're monstrous things, immensely strong. So yeah, a word of advice: don't underestimate anything from the pig family. Beans, just with regard to this tale, suggesting could have been born without it. Potentially, yeah, maybe it's a genetic blip. It's just strange that it's so close. There's no obvious sort of scar tissue that I can see there. It almost does look as if nature would. Oh, shucks, we forgot to put a tail on that one. Oh well, I'm sure he'll survive. Asper, you asking back to the warthogs if the warts have any purpose? Um, I would say not so much so on females, but very much so on the males. So you can tell the difference between a male and a female warthog by looking at the number of warts. So females have got the two warts under the eyes, which of course it's not warts, it's sort of not calcified. What's the word I want? But very, very hard skin. Um, I can't think of the word now. But yeah, really, really hard skin, calloused skin, that will do. But on males, they've got the second set of warts down closer to the snout. That's how you can differentiate the sexes. And the males' warts are much, much bigger than the females. And they act really to protect the eyes during any altercations between two males, because they will fight over the opportunity for breeding rights. And with those massive horns or tusks, sorry, that we were talking about, one of those in the eye could be very, very dangerous. So more than anything else, they are there for protection. Obviously, for those youngsters, they're only small, but they will grow with age. But for the females, not really so important because they will not really be fighting with each other. Otherwise, yeah, self-defense. Got to have the potential ability to defend oneself if caught out in the open by a predator. Harpelme also agreeing, very well healed, no obvious scar tissue on that elephant's bottom. So yeah, maybe it is a genetic thing. Maybe it was literally just born without a tail. I mean, anything's possible. We see some very strange mutations. But yeah, not something I've seen before. I'm sure I have seen elephants missing pieces of tail, although I can't give you a definite explanation as to why it would have happened. But I've never seen one that was cut off right at the top. If you look at this youngster with his back to us there, even if he'd have lost that tail through some other means there should be some evidence of trauma there, but there really didn't seem to be any at all. So yeah, I'm beginning to err on the side more I think about it that possibly was just born without it, a genetic um, omission. Again, most of these elephants just standing around. See the zebras waiting. Come on, get on with it. The warthog's coming back again. As you say, Asbo, demonstrating the ponder factor, the triumph of idleness over willpower. Absolutely. Good to do sometimes. I wonder if this is the same one who's coming in to try his luck again. Nope, still no access. Access denied. Quinn, you're asking why do elephants even need tails? Well, that's a very good question, actually, because to be honest, they probably, in terms of necessities, they are expendable. Um, they do help with getting rid of flies. Flies have a tendency to frequent those areas around the anus and around the penis and the in between the back of the legs. It's an area just because of the deposits that are made in that area. They do attract flies, so mostly it's for just sort of swatting flies away. But I really think, yeah, if you're going to lose an appendage, I suppose that one is fairly expendable for an elephant. There's no obvious requirement for it. But I'm still fairly, probably a little bit self-conscious about it, I would think. I think it's this one who's got all the mud on him on the right, who's the tailless one. And they are also used, the tails, of course, from a body language and a posture perspective. A stressed elephant or an agitated elephant will sort of erect its tail, it'll be sticking out from the body. Same way they use their ears and their trunks to demonstrate body language. Again, if you were going to lose one of those things, rather lose your tail than anything else, I suppose. But it is a way that emotion is conveyed. So there's quite a build-up of animals waiting for their opportunity. But again, Just a lot of standing around. It'd be great to see all the giraffe and all the zebras get together and bully the elephants out of the way. They wouldn't know what hit them. Some mobbing behaviour from the giraffe and the zebras would be new and exciting to watch, that's for sure. Yeah, it seems we had one or two feed issues there at Eldonio. I'm sure we'll be back, but we've headed back to Onguma over in Namibia, one of our new feeds. And lovely to see impalas and springboks. A lot of people are not too sure of the difference between the two of them because they're two of the most common antelope, more springbok in the west and impala in the east. But there you go, see, very, very different from one another. Of course, Springbok are national animal and the name of the rugby team, who are in action this afternoon against Portugal, I believe. But look at the difference in the coloration. You can see the very white bellies on the Springboks, and you'll find that on a lot of desert-dwelling animals or animals that prefer these hot, dry, arid conditions. Just helps to reflect the heat away from the stomach. And that's been known for many, many years, or has been a very obvious feature of the Springbok for many, many years. Even the Bushmen used to consider the arc of the Milky Way, which of course is high above our heads this time of year, spectacular viewing. That white stripe, the Bushmen thought represented the underbellies of a great herd of celestial springbok moving across their heads every night. Some lovely reflections of those wildebeest as well. Whenever I see a wildebeest drinking now, it always makes me think. I don't know whether you've seen that little video that did the rounds a few years ago of two wildebeest trying to debate whether or not something floating in the water was a log or a crocodile, poking it around, and one's convinced it's a crocodile, the other one's convinced it's a log. They're poking it with their hoof. Eventually, the crocodile comes up and grabs one, and then another wildebeest comes up, and the two of them have the same debate. They're not known as the sharpest knives in the drawers, the poor blue wildebeests. Always made me chuckle, that one. Minx, you're asking if we would see lions here. No reason why we wouldn't. There are definitely lions in the area. Possibly not coming down for a drink at this time of the day, but you never know in winter. Things are more active during the daytime in winter due to the cooler temperatures, not such a need to stay out of the heat. So, yeah, absolutely, it's possible. I have to say, all the times I've done live at the waterholes here, I've only ever had one brief view of, I think it was two lionesses that were chased off by an elephant that seemed to be coming down to a drink. I think, was that at Cat Eye Pan? Somewhere in one of the feeds in Greater Kruger. Anyway, but yeah, so not something we get to see very often, but doing it at this time of day, of course, it is peak sleeping time for most of the predatory cats. But you never know. Anything is possible. Rosemary, you're asking if these are black-faced impalas. I need to have a closer look to be sure, but as far as I know, black-faced impalas do occur in this area as well as the normal impalas, if we can call them that. So it's possible. We'd have to have a closer look at them. They're characterized with, say, these darker markings around the face. So yeah, we'd have to have a closer look to be sure. But here are our wildebeest doing what I imagine most lions would be doing this time of the day, enjoying what little shade there is. Mikey, you're asking me for a little bit more of my history. Well, I won't bore you with all the details, but I've lived in South Africa now for this is, I think, my 18th year of being out here. But yeah, I was born in South England, so sort of between London and Portsmouth in that area. But my parents now live in Dorset. So when I do go back to the UK, I'm more in the southwest. How I ended up here is a long and arduous story, but the long and the short of it is that it was a dream of mine to work with African wildlife. I grew up around animals. I was lucky enough to grow up in the countryside and had everything from dogs, cats, hamsters, tortoises, stick insects, birds, you name it. I was involved with it, had a job working at the local stables and things. And then I actually wanted to, or I'd actually applied to try and get a job as an RSPCA inspector, and got quite far down, like over a year of interviews and selection processes, but didn't make ultimately what turned out to be the final cut on the basis of not having enough experience. So that age-old adage of didn't get the job so you haven't got experience and can't get any experience because you can't get the job. I had a little bit of money saved up, and I embarked on a journey of a lifetime to South Africa and did a field guiding course, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and ultimately never went home, to be quite honest. Okay, not a black-faced impala, just for the record, a standard impala. Blackface would have a much darker sort of stripe uh, down the forehead and around just underneath the eyes. So that is a juvenile male normal impala, if we can call him that. Yes, I never went home. Was lucky enough to be able to sort out visas and work visas and things. I was did 6 months of work experience, and then found myself a job in the Sabi Sands, which was pretty spectacular. From there, I went down to KwaZulu-Natal and worked down there for a little while, up to Tanzania, back again to the Sabi Sands, to Sabi, where I spent about 4 years or so as a guide there. And from there, I moved into training. So I've worked for both eco training and for Bushwise as a trainer. And even to this day, I still do a lot of freelance guiding and freelance training. Obviously, thoroughly enjoy the time that I work when I'm working for Wild Earth. And in the background, I run my astrotourism company, Celestial Events South Africa, doing stargazing and telescopic evenings, but all sort of dedicated to doing it in the bush. A lot of training at lodges, a lot of events at lodges and guest houses for tourists to this area. Mikey, apparently, who? Hang on, who worked at Sabi Sabi? I'm trying to figure out these messages. Is that you, Jordan? Did you work at Sabi Sabi? I, I thought, Mikey, you'd worked at Sabi Sabi as well. Jordan, I did not know you worked at Sabi Sabi. I'm not sure when you were there, but yeah, I spent 4 years there from about 2010 to 2014. So that's my life story in a very brief nutshell. So we've got a heron of some description monopolizing the water here as well. I'm going to guess a grey heron until proven otherwise, difficult with the light. But yeah, over the last few years, I've done a lot of freelance work, which has taken me all over the continent. Yeah, looks like a grey heron. So I do spend a lot of time, well, not a lot of time, but I have spent a decent amount of time in Namibia, particularly with my stargazing exploits. So as I said earlier, some of the best places in the world. I'm actually heading down to the Eastern Cape in a couple of weeks' time to go and do some astronomy assessments for some guides. I'll be heading up to Belgefunden next month to do some training. Then I go up towards the Kalahari to also do some training and sort of work in a consultancy role for a lodge that wants to increase their astrotourism offerings. So yeah, all sorts of interesting stuff happening, and I'm very fortunate to move around a lot and see some pretty amazing places. But I consider the Lowveld home. Ultimately, it's where I enjoy the most, and yeah, I really enjoy spending time here. Just looking at this heron, something doesn't look quite right for grey heron. I'm wondering if it's possibly a juvenile black-headed heron or just a funky looking grey heron. Yeah, I think it is a grey heron. Just looks slightly offish, maybe somewhere in between a juvenile and an adult, otherwise known as a sub-adult. Slow, deliberate pacing. Oh, I think it's got something in its sights. Let's see if he's going to skewer himself a fish. Must be a very challenging environment for these water birds, particularly in areas that are not maintained in terms of sort of pumping water. Not that many water birds in Namibia for this obvious reason. Like you had a little bit of a shimmy there. Well, thank you, Mikey. I am very happy and fulfilled. I look back as to what I was doing 20 years ago and what my friends are doing from back in the UK, and I think I've led a very and honoured life, certainly, to see what I have seen, to work with the people that I've worked with, and to spend time in some pretty unbelievable places. It was very much a dream. I always say, people ask, it's when you're a kid, you want to be a fighter pilot or an astronaut. I'd still quite like to be an astronaut, I'm not going to lie. Um, all of those things, and safari ranger, whatever you want to call a safari guide, naturalist, was in that genre as well, but never thought it would actually necessarily happen. I was very, very lucky, very lucky. Supportive parents, right place, right time. And yeah, I wouldn't change anything for the world. Having been away for the last year or so as well, it sort of cemented everything that this is where I want to be, and this is what I'm happiest doing. Okay, well, no luck with our hunting heron, unfortunately, but still nice to see. I think let's head back up to Oldonio and see what's happening at the water there. More of the same. The zebras look as if they've beginning to push home their number advantage now. Elephants look as if they're tolerating things for the time being. We'll have to see if the zebras start infighting with each other, whether that bothers the elephants. Young stallion watching over everybody, making sure his mares are safe. You see that's the male zebra. Well, hard to see from this angle now, but if you do see a zebra from the back, you need to have a look underneath the tail. It's actually quite a sort of a difficult one to explain, but generally speaking, if you see the zebra from the back, underneath the tail, pretty much where the thighs meet, you see a very, very thin black stripe, or almost no stripe at all. That's the male. And the females have a much wider black stripe, just because the reproductive organs are a black colour, so are more obvious in a female from that angle. The ultimate game of chicken. Nope. This one's not backing down, though. Stand defiant, zebra. Oh, maybe time to move. Oh, it's old tailless one. Well, I'd be a bit grumpy too. This youngster's still standing in the waterhole. I almost feel there's a little bit of segregation going on now. These elephants have sort of created a little huddle. It looks like we've got a bit of a truce. Nina, you're wondering if an elephant could kill a giraffe? Absolutely, it could. I mean, an elephant, to be honest, could kill anything it wanted to. It's got so much bulk, and when you've got two great stabbing weapons that can be over a meter long, much longer than that in cases, you can pretty much kill anything you want, should you so wish. Thankfully, the term gentle giant is thrown around a lot, and usually it's correct, although, say, I have the biggest respect for elephants out here than any other animal just because of the sheer size and power of that thing when you've actually seen it push push down trees in front of you, snapping trees that are enormous. You can't even wrap your hands around them or wrap your arms around them. You really do get an appreciation of them. And there was an incident that was seen at this waterhole. It was about a month or two ago. I didn't actually see it happen, but it was brought to my attention, and I've seen the footage of it, where it was really no provocation whatsoever. A big elephant bull chased after a giraffe and stuck its tusk through its flank. We don't know what happened to the giraffe. Um, and so it was completely unprovoked. But the giraffe managed to get out of there, but left with a big wound on its side. So absolutely, it could kill a giraffe if it wanted to. Thankfully, it doesn't happen all that often. But elephants have taken out their frustration on other animals. Buffaloes have been killed, hippos that have been killed. I know of a rhino that was killed by an elephant. But generally speaking, that's either happens with those sort of younger males we were talking about earlier that don't have um, that stabilizing influence in their life of a more mature male, or it happens when an adult elephant bull who's in must, that heightened reproductive state, elevated testosterone levels, just loses his temper really and doesn't know his own strength. Just imagine if elephants were predators, the world would be a very different place then, I would suggest. I'd say. Thankfully, they've got a pretty good relationship with most things, and they are generally quite placid. And yes, you always have to be careful. Oh, we've got some visitors. You always have to be careful and respectful of them, certainly, but as a rule, they're particularly these old bulls are normally pretty docile. You need to be more aware of breeding herds than you do of males, unless, of course, they are in must, but then be able to tell that quite quickly. There's temporal gland secretions on the forehead, the dripping of urine, and just the smell in the air. That acrid smell of must is unmistakable. And then certainly be aware. It doesn't mean just because an elephant is in must, it is going to be aggressive, but you need to be aware that it might be slightly shorter tempered than normal. But yeah, breeding herd, anytime you've got protective mothers and youngsters, you need to be a lot more careful, particularly on foot. I mean, we try and avoid elephant bulls in must, and if you are going to view a breeding herd, you need to make sure that safety is paramount, that you and the animal has got an escape route. But yeah, I would be more dubious about or more respectful about viewing a breeding herd than an old male, certainly. Certainly, in the close to 20 years I've been doing this, I know of a lot more incidents with elephants than any of the other more perceived to be dangerous animals. And I've had one or two run ins with elephants on foot, so thankfully no harm was done, but it's a pretty intimidating thing to go through, that's for sure. Just love that sound that the zebras make, often as an alarm call. All the sounds in the African bush that make me think of Africa. I mean, people think, oh, lions roaring and elephants trumpeting, but for me, that zebras make it such a beautiful sound. It has such a lovely tone. Um, that and the hyenas after dark are two things that really stick out in my mind. That the Scots owl as well during the summer, very repetitive sort of every sort of 5 seconds or so. I'm sure it's different for everybody, but there are certain sights and smells and sounds that very much have associations. And yeah, that's one of my favorites, the zebra whooping. The wild dogs as well, they make some beautiful noises. The sort of the whooing that they make, and also the youngsters when they're in a social grouping, those dogs, they almost cheep like birds. Very sort of uncanine-like noises that they're also capable of making. Okay, looks like we had a little feed issue there again, so we've headed back over to Namibia, but this time to Ukukuyu, which is sort of on the other side of the Tosha. Plenty of Ellies having a drink here as well. But nice to see some smaller elephants, certainly. I still don't think I've seen any females or youngsters at Oldonyo. Whenever I do live at the waterhole, it always seems to be bulls. Evidently, who's populating that area at the moment? Breeding herds are somewhere else. But nice to see us here at. It was interesting to try and work out a situation like this. Are these two different breeding herds, the one on the left and the one's just beginning to file away on the right, or is it one big herd that's just separated slightly from each other? It's very interesting to watch their interactions when two breeding herds come down to drink at the same time. More often than not, it's a a fairly tame situation and communication between all of them. Good chance that they will recognise one another. There may even be related individuals in there. Trying to work out whether or not this is one herd or that's splintered or two. Let's see who that is in the water. Is that a hensbok? Somebody having a good wade around there. Looks like they might have quite long horns. Yeah, looks like hensbok from the body shape of the one moving out on the right. Catherine, I'm sorry you missed the bush, and I'm not surprised. Anybody who's been to the bush will always miss the bush. Africa does get under your skin and into your blood. And once you've spent some time, and the more time you spend within it, the more you want to come back and say, I know that as well as most after last year. So New Zealand was a beautiful country, amazing dark skies, spectacular scenery, um, but not quite the animal diversity that I was used to. And I did miss that excitement of seeing something unusual from time to time. I saw a couple of possums and occasionally a little hedgehog would pop out, but it's very rare to see anything other than sheep, cows, and rabbits, to be quite honest. Some interesting bird life, but nothing like the diversity, even in winter, that we can have here. Just driving through Kruger last week, I was only in there for a couple of days and I wasn't birding per se, but I probably still saw 60 or 70, 80 different species just without trying. That's pretty much the amount that I amassed looking hard for birds in New Zealand. But hopefully you will have a chance to return to the bush at some point. I'm sure this Hensbach has got the best idea out of everybody. There's no danger of crocodiles out here, no crocs in Etosha. Too dry and unpredictable lack of water, or predictable lack of water. So why not have a swim, I say? I don't think I've ever seen an impala or a springbok wade into sort of chest deep, unless they've been chased in. So if they're being chased by dogs or something, it's quite, well, not uncommon for them to get into water. Of course, here you do have crocodiles to tend with, but I suppose better the devil you don't know. If you're being chased by dogs, if you can get into water, the dogs are not going to follow you in, or highly, highly unlikely. So maybe hope that there isn't a croc present at that time, but probably not something you debate too much when you've got a pack of dogs on your heels. The Gemsbok in particular have got some excellent ways of dealing with these very, very harsh environments. They have pretty much the most efficient digestive system of all the antelope species in Africa. So much so that any food items that they eat will generally take around about 3 days before it actually sort of comes out the other end, and there's almost nothing left when it does. Incredibly, incredibly efficient and very, very good at extracting water and nutrients. So they have to eat decent quality produce, but they can eat small amounts of it because of the efficacy of that digestive system. And they also have the ability, like many other animals do, of actually raising their internal body temperature above that of the surrounding environment. And that stops you from sweating, which stops you from losing water and therefore being required to restock that water, which is a very clever adaptation to have. Couple that with, as many antelope and other animals do, that sort of idea of nasal panting, which creates what we call a countercurrent heat exchange. Um, just by breathing over mucous membranes, that cools the blood, and then that cooled blood mixes with the warm blood in the body heading up to the brain and just keeps the body temperature low enough to function so that you don't end up with the risk of a stroke, which is a very real problem if you get too hot. That's one of the reasons that a cheetah is unable to chase anything for a prolonged period of time. It has to stop and rest after a full-blooded sprint because the body just gets so hot that if he didn't stop, he'd literally overheat, or she will literally overheat and have a stroke. So they get vacating the area for this group of Ellies coming in. Stacey, you're saying you're loving the sounds. I seem to be struggling with the ambient sounds today. I'm not hearing much. So I'm glad you are enjoying them. I'm having to sort of. I heard the zebra noises, but the fainter ones I don't seem to be getting today. So I shall vicariously enjoy them through your comment. Well, loads of others coming on. Lots of youngsters coming in at the back now. I can spell the everything. All these elephants have decided. Somebody wanted a pool party earlier. Well, there we go. We've got our little pool party. They're not necessarily having a big splash around just yet. This one's trying to make a wave machine, perhaps, but nice to see them all wading in up to their chest. Danny, I'm very happy to hear that you're enjoying some of these ramblings and that it gets your brain functioning and learning new things. Well, that's the whole point. I mean, it is just awesome to watch, and sometimes it's difficult to be quiet and just enjoy what you're seeing. There is almost, I can't speak for my fellow naturalists, but you almost feel that you need to be giving you a sort of a constant commentary. But it's something I've learned over the years that silence is a very powerful tool that is not used often enough as part of the safari experience. And for people who haven't seen this sort of thing before, it is just such an overwhelmingly amazing scene to witness that sometimes you don't want someone waffling on in the background. So hopefully that we can all find that sort of nice balance between giving some good information and also just enjoying the sights and the sounds. But learning new things is very important. It's one of the things that keeps us going out here. I think if we didn't challenge ourselves to learn new things, then we would, to be honest, get bored of it. I've always said that the day I decide I know everything, which I know will never happen, but if I ever felt myself having that opinion or I wasn't hungry to try and learn more or find out why, would be the day I would stop being involved in this type of industry, because I think that would be such a shame. That's part of the enjoyment. Is that I used to say this a lot when training, that if you don't see something new every single day, every single how lovely it is. Look at all the little ones in there. There's a couple having a little bit of play around. This one closest to us having a good splash around, creating a little bit of mud to splash on himself, I'm guessing. Yep, there we go. It looks like pool time might be over. Just a quick appearance. See a lot of the herd beginning to disperse now. I'm sure the youngsters will not be too impressed by this. I don't know, they wouldn't want to hang around longer. Those ones at Aldonia just stand about and do nothing and guard that waterhole. But yeah, these ones seem to come in, have a quick dip, and then head off. But I do guess they have to travel a little bit further afield to find enough food in an environment such as this. And no time to rest on one's laurels. Sort of completely submerged himself now. This whole caravan of elephants stretching off into the distance. Just a couple of stragglers left behind. But that was a pretty special moment. There must have been about 40 or so. And as soon as they arrived, they disappeared. Interesting to see just one lone bull left behind, but this is quite normal in elephant society on the assumption this isn't a big old bull who was just trying his luck with some of the females there. It doesn't look like it from his size from this shot. This is so potentially a late teenager who started that process of separating himself from his natal herd. And so it isn't really just one day, I'm going to pack my trunk, I suppose we could say, and leave. It happens over a period of time, potentially over years, more and more separation, longer and longer periods apart from the herd. And so just that general air of independence as they grow up. Interesting to see if he does eventually follow them or go off completely in his own different direction. But remember that such is an elephant's ability to communicate over long distances with those low frequency infrasound rumbles that our ears simply cannot pick up. Elephants are always talking to one another, can't see another one anywhere close to an individual. He or she will be in contact with other members of the species over potentially massive distances, stories of 20, 30, 40 kilometers, that those sound waves can travel, often in a sort of a vibratory capacity through the earth, picked up potentially by receptors in the feet or by the little receptors at the end of the trunk. And so I love it when you see an elephant just sort of stand completely still. I always say it looks as if they've run out of batteries, but I'm sure they're either sending or receiving messages over long distances when you see that happening. Okay, so I'm glad that you got your pool party. And Jive Bunny, you're loving the Okakoyu breeding herds. Yeah, the little ones are so cute. They're such a zest and a joy for life. I didn't really notice any of the youngsters really having a good splash around, but say this did seem like a quick stop off at the pool as opposed to a day out, I think. So maybe they were under instructions to not push the boat out, as it were, and just go in, have their drink, cool off, and then time to go. And Liverpool bird, you're right, these ones are not hogging the waterhole like those bulls up in Old Dorney, but this is more what I expect. I consider this more sort of common behaviour. Elephants seem to come in, they have a drink, they mill around for a few minutes, and then they move off. There at Old Donio, it seems to be par for the course. I suppose I should throw in a golf pun with the Open on at the moment, the major. Yeah, they just seem to come down, have a drink, and then just stand and decide to have a snooze next to the water and block everybody else off, which you could argue is a little selfish, but very difficult to argue with a 6, 7 ton elephant, I suppose. I love the way this one just migrates to the absolute centre of the waterhole. And just sort of hear him going, "It's mine, mine, all mine." Okay, speaking of Oldonio, let's head back up to Oldonio and see if those elephants are still monopolising the waterhole. Yes, they are. Pretty much nothing has changed. A lot of standing around. I think these giraffe have grown a little impatient. They're beginning to queue up now. I think this one's thought, no, I'm going to push my luck. The zebra seems to be okay. Let's give it a crack. Mm, yeah, might be a bit scary still. It's really difficult if you want to scratch your neck and you can't quite reach. Flexibility, though, is really incredible. can see this young male, so just taking the opportunity to analyze some of that urine there. Just check this female's reproductive status. You can see the difference in the ossicones, the horns. So thicker ossicone is the one on the left that we can see, or of those two. And then this is a female who's just circled round to the back. I think she decided she wasn't particularly enjoying the attention. Shame I feel for this giraffe. They're getting so close and then they just lose their bottle at the last minute. Oh, strangely invested in these giraffe now. Go on, get in. I have been keeping an eye out for this giraffe that allegedly, well, not allegedly, but was reported to have had some sort of leg injury yesterday. I haven't seen anybody fitting that description yet, but we'll keep checking. Is this one going to go for it? Okay, that occasional characteristic crackle of the call of the red-billed oxpeckers that you can see flying around. Oh, good one, giraffe having a drink. Let's see if that encourages the others that it is safe to do so. You see now that that one giraffe has managed to have a drink, if the other ones can also take some heart in that and follow suit. With a little lip shake there when the head comes up. Remember that when they do bend their necks down to drink, they've got that big ligament on the back of their neck called a nuchal ligament, referring to the neck. And that's normally taut, and it acts, it's not like a muscle, it is a ligament, but it's there to sort of hold the head and the neck up, so it doesn't actually, you don't have to try and keep that neck up in the air like that. That's its natural position, but when they do bend down to have a drink, it's like an elastic band. That ligament stretches all the way down, and then when they stop drinking and they want to bring the neck back up, it sort of pings back up like an elastic band, retracting. And so they often throw that S of water and then give the lips a bit of a shake. There we go, boing, back up. Always just straining forward, thinking about it. Maybe they're just taking it in turns because there's not much space and they're feeling a little cramped with the presence of all these elephants. But that's two out of these four giraffes that have had a drink now. Interestingly, two of the males. It looks like we've got three males and one female there. Whether that's a little bit of boldness on behalf of the males. Oh, will be about to end though. This elephant is just flexing some muscles. And it looks like when this last elephant came in, everybody's moved around slightly, and that's removed the little window that those poor giraffes were given. They will have to continue to wait for their turn, I guess. Ooh. Nick, it is an amazing way to end our day with the elephants and the giraffe and the zebras. I mean, they've been a pretty much constant throughout today. Aldonio has delivered again. But as you rightly say, unfortunately, we are running out of time, sort of inside the last 5 minutes now. But really interesting just to watch the subtle interactions, particularly between these bulls when new bulls come in. The younger one there who had a few things to say about those puppy little warthogs. And then, yeah, I'm sort of really feeling for these zebras and giraffes who are trying their heart out to get in and have a drink. And it must be quite an intimidating place to go and have a drink at the moment. It's like going into a little bar that's packed full of bodybuilders. But otherwise, I think very interesting to see that elephant with no tail. And I guess we will continue our debate as to whether or not that was from an injury or if it was a genetic issue, a little abnormality. I think I'm also, like some of you, were agreeing, erring on the side of a genetic problem as opposed to an injury or an infection, just with the way that there didn't really seem to be any obvious wound or anything like that. Lovely to see the rhinos down at Founders, even if it was a short and sweet affair. And really cool to spend some time at a waterhole that we've only recently started using at Oguma as well. And a pool party at Okoye. So we've had lots of interesting things to see and chat about again today. He's all got a bit of a fright just because I think that elephant just had a drink and they possibly misinterpreted his body language. But err on the side of caution, crikey ones. Matt, I'm also glad you've enjoyed the show, and thank you for thanks. Commenting on all the Ellies. Yeah, it's definitely been an Ellie-packed day, certainly. Yeah, I reckon there was probably a good 50 or so that we watched come down to Kikuyu in that last group. But alas, it is that time, down to the last minute or so. So I'll be back with you again tomorrow from 12:30 until 2:30, and we will see what else we can find. Maybe we spot that giraffe with the injury. Certainly be keeping an eye out for that elephant with no tail. And I wonder if we'll get some interesting sightings at Onguma. But so don't forget, it doesn't end here. You can join the rest of the team, hear about all their plans for this afternoon's sunset safari, a few other bits and pieces that they've seen over the last week or two. And they will be going live a little bit later. So don't forget to tune in for that. But so for myself and for the rest of the team, thanks so much for joining us. I really hope you have enjoyed it and enjoyed the experience and seeing everything. And I'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful Saturday afternoon, coming to you live here from Djuma Private Game Reserve in the Sabi Sand Wildlife Reserve. My name is Steve, joined by Mpo the Flash on camera, and this is On Safari.